Welcome back to New Script on the Block. I'm Grahm Pritchard, and I'm co-hosting with my co-host, Ashley Hakes. I forgot her name for a second. And we have Jim Collette with us, and he brings the script Rotary Dial.
Yeah, so we're going to just jump into it and tell us a little bit about yourself. And
Well, I'm happy to be here. I just drove up from Tucson, where I'm a location scout and writer and still photographer for productions that manage to float down to Tucson, which isn't terribly often, but it does occasionally happen.
Cool.
We do, I'm a member of the LMGI, which is the Location Managers Guild International down there. I think I'm one of two in the state, so any production that comes into town that's looking to shoot, if we had film incentives, we would have more film folks in town, but we do quite a bit of low-budget features. We do fashion shoots, reality TV shows are still big, documentaries, all that kind of thing are still coming into the state. You guys probably get some of that here. Everybody else goes to New Mexico or Southern California.
Yeah, we're losing out, but hopefully...
We're getting there.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully.
It's definitely increasing regardless. The film offices in Arizona and Tucson stay super busy.
Yeah.
So I think if they can convince the State House to maybe throw in a few bucks, we can compete against Albuquerque and everybody that's sucking up all those Breaking Bad dollars.
Oh, man. Well, and then it doesn't help that their new movie just came out, or is coming out, so it's like... Everyone's going to have a resurgence of
anything that takes place in Arizona. I think Rambo 4 or 5 or whatever it is, he's supposed to be retired in southern Arizona. So they shot in New Mexico.
Of course they did. Well, the film Arizona that was supposed to be shot here is in New Mexico.
They shot the film, what was it called? The one about the Yarnell Hotshots.
Oh, right,
by all rights, they really should have shot that here. And it was shot, you have one guess?
Yeah, yep. Well, you win some, you lose some, so hopefully we'll get some more.
In the meantime, I have been writing my whole life. Lately, I do a lot of writing for the LMGI Compass magazine, so when productions want to feature on where they've been filming, for example, we just had one on historic locations in the United Kingdom, so films like The Favorite and what was that one with Tom Cruise where he was battling the creatures endlessly in that loop? Edge of Tomorrow?
Yes.
So, for example, Edge of Tomorrow filmed at Trafalgar Square, so I wrote about that and whatnot. I used to copyright in Tucson back when there were actual ad agencies. I don't think there are anymore, but...
everything's online, I'm sure.
Yeah, the things that we used to charge, $100,000 for, people can now do for like, $1.95. So.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
And in my spare time, I've been putting together shorts. I'm putting together a trilogy of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, if you want to call it that, although I think you were saying, what'd you say? It's not inspired by, but like ripped off from. Is it better?
I think Alyssa said that.
So this one is based on A Telltale Heart, and then one is based on a more obscure piece called, I think it's called Words with a Mummy or something like that. So I've adapted that one, and then the third one I'm trying to figure out one where you don't need a cast of thousands, something that Roger Corman didn't already do.
Yeah. Right. Well, that sounds exciting. When you have the other ones, you should definitely bring them in.
Yeah.
But is there anything else anybody wants to ask, or do we want to just go ahead and get into it?
I say we dive in unless you have any last suggestions.
No, let's just do it cold and then see what happens.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? Before we start, is there any inspiration to why you wanted to do a trilogy of things inspired by Edgar Allan Poe?
I enjoy doing adaptations. A feature film adaptation I did last year as kind of a challenge from director Robert Conway was I adapted a Zane Grey Western. Westerns are making kind of a minor resurgence, and I was working on a film called Eminence Hill in Globe, and directed by Rob, and he kind of challenged me to, because I kept blabbing on about wanting to write one, and he said, well, why don't you just do it? So I wrote one based on a Zane Grey novel called Lone Star Ranger, and it's in the public domain. Anybody can do their adaptation that they want. You could.
Yeah.
And I kind of updated it so it's a little more Unforgiven-like. I mean, the way Zane Grey wrote was fairly 1917 at the time, so with this one, I've always enjoyed that kind of Victorian language from the mid-1800s, and that's really kind of what you get a bit, except it's the Americanized version that Edgar Allan Poe brought to it. So I was looking for 3 pieces that Poe wrote that might lend themselves. This one's inspired by A Telltale Heart, but as we read it, it's been entirely updated, and the other plan was to basically just have like a 2-person cast in a one-set setting that could be filmed pretty cheaply. So that was kind of the goal here, but to retain some of that feeling from the original.
Very cool.
Right. Cool. All right. So, are you okay with doing the narration?
I can do narration.
Okay.
I'll do narration.
Right, and then you'll be Robert, and
Correct.
you'll be Robert and the voice.
The voice.
And then I'll be... Okay, so how do you say her name?
Her name would be Deanne.
Deanne, okay.
And
That's what we thought.
yeah, and Tamerlane is actually, that's a last name stolen from one of Poe's poems of the same name.
Okay.
So I just use that as their last name. And then the voice, there's really 2 voices, so you're going to have to be...
I'll be the other voice.
You're going to have to be, it's the same, but kind of different.
I'll try my best to make it different.
And then the other voice is, I'll just, any old way.
Cool.
Ready?
All right.
All right, this is called Rotary Dial, adapted based on The Telltale Heart by Jim Collette. Title card, Rotary Dial. We hear a phone ring off screen. 1, 2, 3 rings. A fumbling pickup, then...
Hello?
Interior suburban house, bedroom, day. Close on Deanne Tamerlane, 30s, face drawn with terror and anxiety. She sits on the edge of a bed, a typical contemporary bedroom with a large picture window.
It's done. I didn't think they would be so heavy. I've got dirt and shit, Robert. How deep do they have to be?
Dan.
Maybe it's 4 feet now? At least 3 feet. It's this clay. It's like concrete.
She stands, juggling a black rotary dial telephone and receiver.
I told you about the garden.
I dig a hole in the garden. Everyone's gonna see the goddamn hole in the garden.
You're just prepping the soil for next spring. If they ask, look, nobody's gonna ask.
Robert, they begged me. You said they would be...
Of course in that particular situation they're going to. I mean, anyone would do that. It doesn't mean anything in the long run.
Deanne sits again. She seems small, deflated.
Right.
They were mean people, despicable, and we would have had nothing. We would still be driving the Aztec. And how long have you worked at the call center? 7, 8 years? You spend your whole life on the phone, this short life on Earth, selling burial insurance to Vero Beach.
Call me back. I need a beer.
She hangs up before he can reply. She stares at the phone. She lifts the receiver, puts it down, stands abruptly, circles the bedroom, and leaves. We hold on the telephone. We hear a refrigerator door open, close, rustlings. A beer can opens.
God damn it.
Followed by the sound of beer spurting out of the can. More random rustlings. Deanne cleaning up, and she reappears, wiping the suds off the can with a paper towel, flinging her wet fingers. She goes back to the window, drinks. She stares and stares, thinking back. The phone rings. She jumps. She walks over quickly, thinking it's Robert, stabs at the receiver, angry, lifts it up.
The Aztec? This was about the Aztec?
When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight, when the bell sounded the hour.
The voice is elegant, erudite, English, like a slightly deranged Victorian butler. It sounds close yet distant, as if echoing from a phantasmic Victrola.
Hello?
There came a knocking at the street door.
Deanne hangs up. Wrong number, clearly. She takes another long swig of the beer, hands trembling. The phone rings. Quickly, she picks up.
Hello?
I went down to open it. For what did I have now to fear? There entered 3 men, officers of the police.
She slams down the receiver. She suddenly turns, lifting her head up, and screams to herself, to no one. The screams ebb to sobs, tears. Sitting back in the bed, she dials 1 digit, the next, the next.
Hello?
What the fuck kind of phone is this?
Who
the fuck has a rotary phone, Robert? That's just like your parents to have a black rotary phone and...
She is exhausted, strung out, her voice weakening.
They said to please let them live. They held hands, Robert. God damn it. And you said they beat you, and the thing about how they took all your birthday presents and threw them in the swamp? What?
She looks out the window.
There's no fucking swamp here. Was that even real?
Yes. It was exactly as I described it.
Deanne clutches her throat, almost hyperventilating.
Calm down. This is a natural response to what you did.
Fuck you!
And again she hangs up. Almost instantly the phone rings. Still reeling from Robert's words and her own guilt, she...
Hello?
I bade them search well, while I, myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my set upon the very spot where reposed the corpse of my victim.
The voice stops. Deanne looks at the receiver, confused.
Robert?
But ere long, I found myself getting pale and wished them gone.
She drops the receiver, as if it is a live thing, hears nothing. Slowly, quietly, she retrieves the receiver and places it back on the cradle. She stands and backs away from the phone. A heavy moment of silence, and it rings and rings. Deanne doesn't pick it up. Her focus never leaves the phone, as if willing it to stop. But ring, it continues and continues. She reaches for it, picks up, says nothing.
Hello? Deanne? Deanne, is that you?
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Robert, I cut off the heads and the arms and the legs.
Deanne, Jesus, you're nuts.
You piece of shit. You convinced me this was the right thing to do. That voice of yours, over and over. Those long nights that we talked on the phone. What needed to be done. What had to be done. I listened with a light heart, as if you were joking. But you continued, and you became more insistent and distinct with the plan, until my head ached and my ears rang.
She stops as if in a trance. A long moment, then...
You examined the bodies?
Yes.
You placed your hand upon their hearts and held it there many minutes?
Yes.
And they were dead? Stone dead?
Yes.
Then their evil will trouble us no more.
A long stretch of quiet, then a whisper.
Yes.
So, what are you going to do? We talked about this part of the plan, too. Your feelings of despondency, the dreadful echoes, the hellish tattoo of your heart. Do you remember?
I remember.
You said you were like a lantern, all closed, that no light shone out, and your mind, like wind in a chimney, a mouse crossing the floor. Those were your words.
I remember.
He lets her voice die away before replying.
It's in the drawer by the bed. I know you find it difficult to load the clip. I did it for you.
Deanne moves the phone away from her ear, looks at it with a vacant expression.
I'll call you back.
And hangs up. She picks up the telephone and places it in her lap. Her hand covers the receiver, and she waits expectantly.
Oh, my.
The phone rings as she knew it would. She slowly lifts the receiver, listens. Nothing. No voice, just the electric hum of distant phone lines.
Go on.
At first, stillness. Then...
I heard a ringing in my ears, much like the sound of a watch enveloped in cotton. I paced the floor, to and fro, but the noise steadily increased. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard not. It grew louder, louder.
Deanne opens a drawer in a bedside nightstand. In the drawer, we see a pistol.
And still the men chatted pleasantly, and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God! No, they heard. They suspected. I felt that I must scream or die, that anything was better than this mental agony. Louder, louder, louder.
She takes the pistol out of the drawer.
Villains, I shrieked. I admit the deed. Here, here. Tear up the graves.
Raises it to her head, cut to black, and the sound of a single gunshot. Fade in, interior suburban house, bedroom months later, night. Close on a nondescript cell phone, lying on a folding chair, the ringer goes off a synthy ringtone. We reveal Robert Tamerlane, pushing late 30s in a crisp dress shirt and slacks. He is in his late parents' house, the same bedroom, but no bed, the same spot where Deanne put the gun to her head. But except for the chair, it is empty, as if for sale. He picks up the phone, already annoyed.
Yes?
Hello, is this Robert Tamerlane?
It is a typical toneless sales pitch woman's voice, echoing in some noisy boiler room call center.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to be toneless. Sorry, let me try that again. I am calling about your software that helps you with the strategic implementation of your financial transactions. Is this a priority for you today?
I'm sorry, who are you?
Are you interested in a product demonstration that can guarantee online savings of up to 50% with no obligation to purchase?
Robert looks at his watch, absently stares out the window.
No, I'm fine.
He's about to hang up when...
Then I have one more question for you. You fancied me mad, didn't you?
The sales call voice is transformed into something quite familiar. Robert doesn't quite believe it. He brings the phone closer to his ear.
Deanne?
A beat.
When I first called you, selling burial insurance, a stupid, foolish girl, yes, but mad? Throaty laughter. That was terrible.
You can do throaty laughter.
All right. You should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded with your instructions, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in, how I moved the knife slowly, so very, very slowly. And had you been there, had you not been so singularly? Had you not been so God dang it. At ease with your seduction, you would have heard their slight groans. Not groans of pain or grief, oh no, but the low, stifled sounds that arose from the bottom of their souls.
With a tingling dread, Robert slumps in the chair. The din of the call center begins to increase in volume.
You have the wrong number. You called the wrong number.
Was I nervous? Yes, very dreadfully nervous. I had been, and I am. But why will you say that I am mad? This life with you has sharpened my senses, not dulled them. Above all is the sense of hearing acute. I hear all things in heaven and in earth. I hear many things in hell. How then? Am I mad? Hearken, Robert, and observe how calmly I tell you the whole story.
As the sounds of the call center reach a deafening crescendo, we hold tight on Robert, struck dumb and numb with fear. Cut to black. Title card. I was never really insane, except on occasions when my heart was touched. Edgar Allan Poe. Fade to black. Edgar Allan Poe is a bitch.
This podcast is brought to you by Arizona Studios. Arizona Studios, a full-service video content specialist. We're here to illuminate your message and compel your audience to take the right action. For more information, head to our website at arizonastudios.com and be sure to tune in for more content on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.
So I'll say this, I really enjoyed this. I feel like I could see it being like, I could actually see the visualization of all of it. It has been a long time since I've actually read Telltale Heart, so I can't really remember how that ends.
Yeah, and for our listeners, for everyone that hasn't ever read that, do you mind, like, not compare and contrast, but just give us a little, like in this, it seems like and I'm kind of getting off topic because I have another question about who she killed. But just give us a little information about his story and kind of your story and where you drew inspiration and whatnot.
Yeah, in the story, it's from the point of view of the killer who has done this guy in, and it's left a little bit to your imagination as to why he might have done it. You just get the feeling that he's not terribly thinking straight and going insane. Mm-hmm. Some of the reasons he gives are completely ridiculous as to why he would bother killing somebody and then cutting them up. And so he does do that, and then he buries the corpse, and ultimately the police show up, and in his mind, he can hear ultimately the heart of the corpse beating.
Right.
And he ends up confessing to the police that, in fact, it's right there where he's standing or sitting. And that's kind of the end there. Most of the dialogue in this one, obviously it's been updated to more or less current times. A lot of the dialogue from the voice is right out of Poe. That's basically, in the original story, those are his words as he's describing his tale. Mm-hmm. And so here, basically, while it's not really stated as such, that voice becomes something like a reflection of her own kind of madness and guilt for having been talked into essentially. This probably answers your question. Hopefully we'll need to make this clearer if it isn't already, is that she has done in his parents for reasons that are basically not terribly explained. But he has, after their relationship has evolved, he's basically slowly turned her essentially crazy and convinced her to do this thing, for the money, for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. In a way, this voice, it kind of is the voice in her head, which is essentially just... But it also, one of the inspirations for this is the fact that phones, and the reason it's called rotary dial, they're often can be used for sort of really scary purposes. A lot of times when you get a phone call, you don't know who it is necessarily. Mm-hmm. You're half expecting bad news some of the time. Right. Or it's somebody you don't know, and they're asking you all kinds of oddball questions. And sometimes we get just bad news on a telephone, on the phone. Right. And it's kind of a disembodied way to communicate with each other. To this day, it's even almost worse than it used to be, because now daily I get probably 10, 15 spam calls from, and for the most part, I never answer them. Right. But still, just this notion that people would just be calling you out of the blue for whatever reason is bizarre. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was a story that Ray Bradbury wrote way back when, probably from the 1950s. I think it's in maybe his October Country collection called The Wind, and it's about, basically it's about a guy getting a phone call from, I believe it's his friend, and his friend is describing this store. I may be forgetting the story, it's been a long time since I read it. He's describing this wind, this storm, which to his friend on the phone. The entire story is basically taking place as a phone conversation. And ultimately the wind, you can feel, becomes this kind of malevolent force, which is ultimately going to kill his friend. And he's trying to describe it. And it's just this sense that you can have the sense of terror just coming over the phone lines. In her case, in this script, she works at this call center, spent her young life working that job. And so there's a bit of a connection there too. But there really isn't, in many ways, there's not a whole lot of, it's called based on, but it's more of a lifting dialogue out of type thing, out of the telltale heart. But I did try to capture some of that idea that, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be explained, but that you have strangeness that in our lifestyle today that comes across in odd ways through our devices. Including the phone. And a rotary dial phone is something that I remember from I don't know, not too long ago, but I guess it was a long time ago. Have you ever seen a rotary dial phone?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Props.
Actually, actually using one was a kind of a pain. And if this were filmed, that rotary dial phone would actually be a good part of the framing of the shots. It would probably always be in frame in some way, or at least often.
Right.
It would kind of take on a life of its own.
I like that.
Yeah.
But as you can tell, the language coming across with the voice it's taken almost verbatim from Poe, and it's pretty Victorian.
Yeah.
There was definitely an attempt to take Deanne's voice and Robert's voice as being relatively contemporary, but this voice coming over the phone was distinctly not. And it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
If I were an actor, I'd have problems with it.
Oh, yeah.
Frankly. And it's the same thing at the end, where Deanne herself takes on that, ultimately the spirit of Diane through the phone takes on that same kind of persona.
Right.
To essentially tell Robert that he's screwed, in some fashion.
Right.
So
I like that, just the way that it ended, and like how now he's maybe gonna go insane. Like, we don't know. I kind of like that there's that little hint of like, well, we don't know what's gonna happen. To like, is he gonna just like brush it off and be like, or is he gonna really dwell on that and then him also go crazy?
I think some of my favorite horror films usually end with something that is it's not necessarily explained, or at least, I mean, John Carpenter is really good at this. There's almost always something at the end where you're thinking, well, it's done.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not done.
But is it?
Michael
No.
Myers is not done, clearly.
Right.
20,
Yeah.
how many years later? 30, 40?
Oh, man. Lost count.
Yeah, I have totally lost count of all the Freddys and all the...
Oh, yeah. We it's just going to keep going.
But, I mean, I loved the fact that when Jamie Lee Curtis looks out the window, he's gone at the very end. That's just about the last frame, I think. Or even in something as more fun as Big Trouble in Little China, at the very, very end, that strange monster at the very end comes popping up one last time, even though you didn't really need that right at the end.
Yeah.
Or the end of The Thing is even more classic. At the end of The Thing, you're sitting there and you're looking at I think there's two of them left at the very end.
Yeah.
You don't know which one
Yeah.
is the alien.
Right.
At least I didn't.
Well, and I don't know how true this is, but I think when they were shooting that, no one knew, like, who, if
Really?
any, yeah, like,
I didn't know that.
it was kind of like a big secret on set of, like, are you? I don't know. Are you? I don't know. I don't want to say, or I don't want to give myself
Is the
away.
dog
but
still alive? I don't remember at that point.
I don't think so.
So it's got to
dog
be one of the
survived.
two.
Yeah.
It's either Kurt. It can't be Kurt because he's got to be.
Because he's the hero.
But that kind of ending is always, I think, a little. Some people they just can't stand it. Like,
Yeah.
My oldest daughter doesn't like those kind of endings.
It depends with me, though. Like, I like this ending, and I feel like this is conclusive of, like, all right, this is what's going to happen to him, and it's kind of like, it does leave your what is it, to form your own conclusion, but
yeah, there's a lot of discussions on, like, open endings. Yeah. And I think that's what's, like, so fun about them is, like, there's so much discussion, there's so many, like, thoughts that, like, and opinions that people have about what's happening or what's going to happen. So I love open endings like that.
Yeah.
And these days, I mean, with franchises, usually you have open endings for even other
sequels.
Reasons. Yes. But even if you don't necessarily plan on continuing the thing forever, I think sometimes it does work.
Yeah.
Maybe not always. We should try and think of an example where you have a definitive horror film ending. I suppose, like, at the end of Psycho, he's caught and we know who he is. And however, at the very ending, like, if I remember, Alfred Hitchcock does this thing where he is moving into a closer shot of Anthony Perkins, and you see briefly this skull
Yeah.
And so even then, you're kind of wondering, like, is this guy going to, like, break out of?
Yeah, like what does that mean?
Yeah, what's it mean? And is he going to just what? Yeah. So there's still that little. That was a great shot.
Yeah.
If you blink, you miss it.
Right.
It's one of those kind of things.
I'm trying to think. I don't know of any, especially horror films, of like how it just ends.
Well, even in like the first Raiders of the Lost Ark, he could have ended it, I suppose. Like, and instead he kind of adds this, which sort of always used to bug me a little bit, that he added this thing where the guy's like going through this,
Man, I haven't seen that in forever.
Well, all the crates, right?
All the crates. So you don't. It's just it's just going to get lost for time.
Right.
And I don't know that he ever came back around to like do the. Like, where is the darn thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know where it is. It showed up in an episode of the TV show The Librarians.
I feel like
he's got the Lost Ark of the Covenant in their basement in that TV series.
Right.
Which isn't a bad series. It gives me a headache trying to follow it because they're trying to stuff so much into every episode. But
yeah, that's what's hard.
This one, a little constructive criticism would be good too. So
the writing style, I really like it. One thing about it is, these dashes. Is that just like your writing style? I know I've seen that before.
Well, a lot of times, if you are, especially in action scripts, it's more for the reader, perhaps, than it is for the director, but so that it flows. But a lot of times there will be this transition. Here it's a couple dashes, but this is definitely partly me, and I think there's different ways you could clearly do that. A lot of times you'll see it just before a scene change, when there's some relationship to the next scene, and you want to give that sense of a transition into the next scene. But a lot of writers forego that as well. So you should talk to one of the Avenger script writers and see what they do.
Yeah.
No, I just thought that was very interesting because it's not something I see, at least the screenwriters or screenplays that I've read, it's not something that I see very commonly. So I just thought it was really cool that...
I need to disable the dash key.
No, I mean, I think it works because it's like, I feel like this is not a script that's not trying to, like, keep going. Like, it's supposed to take its time, and kind of you want to spend as much time with Deanne on screen as you want to, and I think in the script that kind of reflects that, of having these dashes to give you that little bit of pause time between, even if it is in the description or in the text, or in the dialogue, sorry.
And some of them even give you context, like the one where when she's, her focus never leaves the phone as if willing it to stop, but ring, ring, it continues and continues. I think that really emphasizes, and it's like almost like the ring, ring is interrupting like the continuous ringing. So I just think it's like very...
Yeah, I think usually it's a good idea, well, at least for me it is I've read a lot of scripts. Usually when you're doing location management, at some point you get at least some idea of what you're supposed to be looking for out there in the way of locations. I always like it when the author, the scriptwriter, has made it somewhat easy on the reader to just kind of flow along. But I was rereading the script for, actually it was Casablanca the other day, and I was amazed by how modern that script read as well. So, these are techniques that have been going on forever.
Right.
That script is an easy read as well. It still holds up. Well, the movie obviously holds up, but even the script does.
Yeah. I'll have to read it.
Yeah. The great thing is that these days a lot of scripts are available online, and that certainly wasn't the case as recently as probably even 10 odd years ago. But now there's, it seems like the studios, well, either they're being put on there without studio approval, which is one thing, but it does seem like the studios are loosening that up a little bit, so it's a lot easier. For some reason, I was curious about that one Thor movie, Ragnarok, and because I wanted to see how they set up their action scenes, because there's a shit ton of action in that, just continuous.
Yeah.
Well, like in all the Avenger movies.
Right.
All the Marvel movies. And it's really interesting how they'll make it kind of easy on the reader and the director to get a sense of the flow that you then see on the screen, as opposed to just sort of like,
chunks and blocks.
Chunks of like, and then he hit so-and-so, they turn around, and then that could go on forever.
Right.
A lot of times they even shorten it up with like just sort of bulleted items, like stuff is flying by so fast by the time it gets to the screen that on the written page you try to emulate that, and in their case they emulated it with a series of sort of like bulleted items, like all these things are happening. Like if you look at the scene in Captain America, which one was it, where he has the fight in the elevator.
Is it the Iron Man? And
no, this was Captain America, and he is in an outdoor elevator.
Yeah.
So he goes into the outdoor elevator.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, all these bad guys join him, like 10 or 12 of them.
Yeah.
And there's like this fight in the elevator, so they have about half as much room as we have here.
Right, yeah.
If you were trying to write that, it would be almost it would be hard to describe
everything
happening.
But at least with the guy writing the Thor script, he was able to do it using some of those techniques. So it's worth studying those.
We've just around the office have looked at a couple of different, between, I can't remember which ones we've been looking at. But yeah, we just look at them and just are like kind of deciphering them of how are they using this? How are they explaining that? And we find out that either it's different from what is being shown, or they do it in a way that's like, that's not how I was taught to write. So I'm conflicted, because it's like I was, in school you were told, do this. And then you look at these big budget movies and they're breaking all those rules, which it's like, well, duh, they can, because they're making the big bucks and they can afford to do that. But it's like, but I could be writing my scripts like this, and they would go along better, like they would read better. So should I be doing that?
I think it is a good exercise, and it's being made possible to by the fact that a lot of them are online now. But you reminded me of when I was in my bachelor's degree is in journalism, and I remember we had a class on design, newspaper design at the time. This is back when they had these things. They were newspapers.
Oh my gosh, what?
And you open them up. No. And I remember and it was a really nice guy. He was probably my age. I mean, this is when I was like in my mid-20s, so I'm now like 40 years older. And he said, all right, so now when you do your headline, you're going to want to have this font. When you do your subhead, you're going to want to have the same font. And then, and it was very rigid and of its time, which was late 70s. All right. And then sure enough, like USA Today came along, I swear, like 3 or 4 years later, and suddenly they had like 19 different fonts. And I'm like, wait a minute, I was told not to mix fonts. So things change just like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to keep up. If I were a young person, I would feel so much more at ease with the change that's going on. Because I think it's a lot easier to adapt when you don't have your mind filled with how it should be.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, things are, now that we've seen those, it's like, well, all of that stuff is out the window. I'm going to write it the way I want to. So, but back to yours. I mean, I like it. This is hard because I don't really know what sort of feedback. I know you said just like
you should be brutal, but
Mm.
like you were saying, well, who did she kill? And that's a major issue if you don't know who she killed. So
well, and I understood
she did end up killing his parents,
and that's what I got from it. But it did leave me a little. I think I think it was when he was sitting in his parents' house, and it was the same place. That's where I was like, oh, okay, like.
Well, and I'll tell you the truth. I changed that setting. Originally, I had him in a different house, like a different. It's supposed to take. That last scene is supposed to take place months later, but I had him in like a different, like more cooler house, like a modern, contemporary type thing, or maybe an office, something like that. And then I thought, well, it might be interesting if after she did this act and he supposedly got away with it, he ended up selling the house, probably reaping the money from it, and he'd be back in there when the whole thing is cleaned out when she made this call. But I think you're right. I think that needs to be, if I'm going to go with that, that needs to be a little clearer as to what's going on there.
Well, and also, I mean, her, telling him like, you said that they were terrible people and your birthday presents, they threw them away, but there's obviously nowhere that they could have disposed of them the way that you described it. Like, was this even real? Like, are you just lying to me? Like, that is when I realized, like, oh, she killed his parents.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. That might have been what it was, and then I got confirmed when he was sitting.
Yeah, there is, and this is a little tricky. It is a slow reveal, I think, kind of how they think about it, and it could be an issue if it's too slow or too fuzzy. Like right off the bat at the beginning, and I'm a big believer in starting in the middle of a story. In this case, it's already happened. And you've already killed him.
And you're trying to figure out, like, you're getting context from what they're saying and what's happening to kind of figure out what's happened in the past.
It's not unlike the original story. In the story by Poe, if I remember, and I have to admit I haven't read it in about 6 months. He is he's already gone mad, basically. You can kind of tell he's already nuts. And he's talking about, and you're kind of like, who's he talking about? It's not even that long a story. It's you can read it in like 10 minutes. In this case, Deanne, it's kind of slowly revealed that she's the one who did this. And the idea with, like, are you even telling the truth is no, he probably is lying about everything. He's essentially drove her to madness using the supposed love for each other. And he has probably had some intention of using her to his bad end. I think that could probably be tweaked a bit more to get that across without making it a whole lot longer. It's already it's pushing the boundaries a little bit of a short length, closing in on probably 20 minutes, because the way I would film this, the pace of it would probably be a little more like, not an Avengers pace at all, but more kind of like a Game of Thrones type pace where things are sort of a little more
drawn out,
a little more, some people would say drawn out over 8 seasons, but gosh, I was just watching it the other night. I was rewatching season 2 and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is slow. But it still involves you, but my wife asked, she said, well, what happened in the episode? And I said, well, mostly just people talking. Somebody threw their clothes off and that was like the one thing, but there's not always a whole lot of action. You think back on Game of Thrones and you think about the big battles. But a lot of episodes were mostly people just scheming for 60 minutes or longer. So the pace of this would probably be a little more along those lines. So it's already going to be pushing probably a 20-minute
But I think with that said, I think it really wouldn't... I don't know. I like the pace. I like that there's not so much exposition just shoved down your throat of like, this was our plan. Like, you never really know the full extent of the plan. You only have heard the last bit of it. And then was that final part of the plan was her to kill herself? Like,
in his mind, that would be another thing. Yeah, so in his mind, he has always intended for her to take the fall on this in some fashion.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I would agree. It's not all explained, but it is tricky because just enough has to be explained for you to kind of go, oh, I think he really meant for her to maybe kill herself.
To do
at the
it,
end.
yeah.
And she's already like near the end of her rope, having done what she did.
And then the craziness setting in of like, uh-oh. So she really will do something to herself if this keeps on going on. But I don't know. I liked it. I liked the pace. I liked that, there wasn't so much information being given, but I was still able to put the pieces together. The dialogue was enough to really make you feel for, this poor woman. She's been manipulated by this man, and now
you could do a gender switch here. I was thinking about that later. It would be interesting to see how that would work. If you had, because a lot of times women are put into the role of the victim. Now, in this case, she strikes back.
Right, yeah.
But nevertheless, she still is a victim.
Right.
And probably has been abused. And that's often a role that a woman historically has been put into. It might be interesting to flip it.
To flip it, yeah.
Yeah, it could be done.
Yeah.
Probably.
I know I've already said it a handful of times, but I liked it.
Cool.
I mean, either way you do it, if you did, keep it this way, or if you did the gender reverse, or if you had same, what if, it was a same-sex kind of thing, like two guys or two girls, like either way.
It could work. In fact, that might work even better.
Yeah.
And I think if you were casting it and you happened upon, let's say, two guys or two gals who were working together in the scene, you might just decide to go with it.
Yeah.
It could absolutely
It just
work that way.
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit, like, I often go back to those old historic tropes of casting, so that the first thing I think of is like, well, the woman's taking it and the guy's, pounding on her, and I'm like, that doesn't have to be the way it has to be. It can be turned.
Right.
And really probably should be. It's the way it's written here. But it could be. If you had two women or two men, I think it could still absolutely work.
Yeah.
It might even be more interesting, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, it's not so dependent on their, who they are as, physically, but just how they are mentally and, like, how they're doing things, how one is manipulating the other and the other's going insane. So, I don't know. I liked it. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know what else to say other than I think this would make a really good short film.
Yeah, it was kind of a warm-up exercise to a script I just finished, this is not my happy place, writing grief-stricken. Usually I like humor better. And I was talking to Robert Conway, is the director in Phoenix, and he just finished that Western I was talking about. You should keep an eye out for it. It's called Eminence Hill. It's got Dominique Swain, who was the second Lolita. I don't know if you watched the remake of Lolita.
Yeah.
20, I think it was like 19, 20 years ago.
I feel like...
With Jeremy Irons.
I feel like
she was the
oh, man.
second Lolita when she was 12. I think she was 12 or 13 at the time. Now she's 20 years older. So she's in it. Lance Henriksen from Aliens is in it, so that's cool. And Barry Corbin from... You guys remember that show Northern Exposure from the early 90s?
Sounds familiar.
It's a well-written show if you can find it, which is almost impossible. But, anyway, those guys are in it. It's a good Western. It's really violent. But anyway, he also did one of those Krampus movies a couple of years ago.
Oh, man, yeah.
And, what was the point here? So the point was, I asked him, I said, I'm thinking of writing a comedy horror, and he said, don't mix genres. Whatever you do. Bad idea. And I'm like, well, really?
What's his name did it? What was that movie? The one that was like, it is classified as a horror movie, but there is a lot of comedy.
Movies?
No,
I mean, they
no,
did
no,
it, but...
not those. But yeah, that is it too. No, the more recent one, Jordan Peele.
Oh, Get Out. And,
there you go.
Yeah.
What's his other one?
Us? Was Us
Oh yeah,
it?
Us.
But the first one, Get Out, like that one has a lot of comedic things in it, but it is a horror film. So
I think it helps to have a little bit of, at least a moment or two, where you take away you break up the tension a little bit, because usually you can bring that tension right back, even stronger afterward.
Well, yeah, and especially after someone like connects to a character, and like something like funny can make people connect to that character. So like bringing that tension back definitely could help
you
it.
feel for him more.
You know, the one time I've seen an audience just leap out of their seats, and this was a long time ago, but they were laughing while they were doing it, was at the end of the original Carrie.
Wow.
You know, that famous scene where her arm comes up and grabs Sissy Spacek's arm. And literally, like, there was this big football guy in front of me with his date, and he just went, "Wah!" But then immediately start laughing. And I think a lot of times the sense of horror and horror and what would you call it?
Happiness or joy.
Yeah, is kind of in both cases you can be crying or screaming, that kind of thing.
I know I cry when I laugh, so but I don't know, that could be something medical, I have no idea.
I don't know if I've ever cried after screaming, but I might, I don't know.
Any closing thoughts, because we are getting to our kind of limit. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think it was very well done. I really enjoyed reading it, and I hope that it's either made into a short one day and come in with the rest of the trilogy.
Yeah.
If, I'll wrap up the third one. If I need to find them. If anybody has any ideas, put them under comments.
Yeah.
As to the third one, and I'll bring it up here. But
cool.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was fun. We will look forward to hopefully having some more from you in the future. And so thanks for listening. If you have any comments on Jim's Rotary Dial script, leave a comment or send an email to info@Arizona Studios, and we will forward them to Jim. And we will... I keep wanting to say see you next time, but it's you'll hear us next time. That's what Alyssa always says. So, yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Yeah.
All right,
Bye,
Ed.
guys.